of 2025. To start us off, we've got a karakia in front of us. You would like to join in? Do you have that karakia? Yeah, let's share. Please join in. To taua mai ora, to taua mai ora, to taua mai ora, to taua mai. Kia tapu ai te mautu, te mauri ora, ki te karatua, omie, hui, tai, kia ora. And today...
Can we just check that the sound is working, please?
Sure.
Chairman Barber, is the sound okay in the chambers?
Yeah, I can hear you all.
Thank you.
Sounds good.
Thank you, Baden. We have some important guests here today also. Dave, just a warm welcome to you, the CEO of NEMA, who will be providing our NEMA update later on today. Also, welcome to all our locals here. Kia ora, tātou, for being in today's chambers. And thank you, Mayor Craig, for hosting us.
Good.
Kia ora. So, team, today's agenda is quite significant, particularly our decision item around the transformation plan that we've worked so hard on. There'll be a lot of conversation around that, a lot of questions, and also making sure that we get that piece of right as we take it to our councils, to our other boards, and obviously to our community. So if we head to our agenda, Mayor Craig, would you like to do the housekeeping?
Okay. If there's an emergency out there, now where do we meet? In the Coronation Square. Yeah, in the Rose Garden, you'll probably get scratched to death before you get there, but we'll get there. And the toilets, there's a public toilet there, and there's another one up through the hallway.
Kia ora, thank you. There are no apologies. Are there any notices? There are none. Any conflict of interest declarations in today's items? There are none, thank you. Can I please have a mover and a seconder that the minutes from the last joint meeting are true and accurate? Good move. Thank you. We have a seconder. All those who agree say aye. Aye. Those against, carried. Just to acknowledge that today's meeting will be recorded and shared on our website at a later date. Okay, then we move into the Hawke's Bay CDEM transformation program update. We will get a presentation. Thank you, Matt. Matt Bold is our transformation director, who's been working across council, across services, across mana whenua groups, and more work to come with our mana whenua groups, as we will highlight in the strategy. But we will hand it over into your capable hands, Matt. Kia ora.
Kia ora tātou. Thanks for the chance to brief today. Today you've got a briefing pack in front of you which has asked you to approve the transformation strategy. Note the transformation update, which is the report, and then provides you a draft dashboard. It's the first hack at a dashboard. Dashboards can evolve over time, and you can give me feedback later on about what you like and don't like, and we can take it from there. The dashboard, I think you'll find in due course, will be a tool that the CEs will use at head level to guide operational actions, and then we'll roll it up at the governance as you see. What I'll do is I'll just take you through the first part of the report and then go to the transformation strategy and then dashboard and follow that. I know this is a formal meeting, but clearly if you want to ask questions throughout, it's highly appropriate. The background, based on our meeting in November, you provided a series of actions and guidances. The background section from paras 5 to my eyes go funny on me, 10.5, provided guidance on what actions have taken place in some 3 months since that event. You provided guidance about engagement and so on. The transformation strategy itself, I'd like to just take you through the transformation strategy. We went through a process where the draft was produced, a The draft was provided to a number of post-settlement groups as well as local councils and the Emergency Services Coordination Committee members. And then between myself and Shane, the CDEM group professional staff, we've been and briefed everyone involved and sort of feedback. I have an informal copy of that feedback that I provided to Doug as the chair of PEG and to Nick as my employer, just to gauge a sense from that. That feedback has been incorporated into the strategy that you see now. The summary of the feedback is included in Paras 12. And in no particular order, the transformation strategy, the draft one, has been amended to place the community at the heart of the transformation strategy. And that was a major focus across all stakeholders throughout the engagement. I've attempted to do that by describing a system that's built from the bottom up first, community, then local, then regional. The improvements required in the strategy need to emphasise the importance of volunteers. That would never be more so the case than in councils such as Wairau and Central Hawke's Bay, where the council staff simply can't staff 3 to 4 shifts of an EOC, let alone the welfare staff required and so on. That will require us to use some thinking around how we employ staff or engage them or encourage them to volunteer. And there's plenty of examples around the country, and we'll adopt one that suits us, from 0 hours contract to volunteerism through to something in between. And we'll go through that process between now and May. The clarity of roles and responsibilities is clearly something I have to work on, and that's an operational activity I do again between now and May. That will highlight what role the regional council have in the system vice local councils, and I think that will be the key component there. And a good example is the work we're doing at the moment on IT. Who's providing the framework for our common operating picture and so on for us to hook into versus what's each council doing and what's their role in that space? Who's responsible for fleet? Let alone who's responding when and where to what event. Everyone had a desire for the system to be measured and assured. Everyone had a desire to have visibility of the system. I see today you're getting some visibility on the system right now. There's a lot of data in there, and it'd be great to move from data to assessment and conclusions or observations or so on from that point there. A number of stakeholders talked about hazard modelling, and that's a great activity to talk with the group and with the regional council. The importance of governance. I would just ask that you consider governing the transformation system at Joint Committee and KEG a little bit more than currently the quarterly system is providing. I think in the next 3 years, quarterly won't cut it. Now, whether that's at KEG level or KEG and Joint Committee level, that's your call. But I think we would need to consider going from 4 to 6 kind of meetings a year, or maybe there's an operational group. And I know in some regions they have an operational group that sort of sits in between that manages it on our behalf. And a number of stakeholders expressed a view that lifelines and the broader emergency systems report and provide visibility at this meeting and at the KEG meeting. The transformation strategy itself, it's provided for you in the briefing pack. I'll go through it very quickly so that we have time for Q&A. The key facts part, I think that the bit I couldn't actually array, and the bit that would be great to do in due course, and Shane and I, when Shane finds some time, which is hard for him to do at the moment, is if I arrayed a map of our hazards on where our people live, because with the deepest respect, if land breaks, we can show some resolution around that and some resilience, but if people break, that's deeply concerning. I would say 95% of our people live where their hazards are. It's very hard for me to show this in this graphic here. What I'm trying to show you is that our people live where the rivers are, where the roads are, where the bridges are, and they break and crack and get destroyed. And our region has one road in, one road out, one port in, one port out, one airport in, one airport out. We're both rural and urban. And in the last 10 years, we've experienced a major event. In the last 25 years, we've experienced catastrophic events. And so I can't stress enough that our system needs both a local system and a regional system. And in the last 5 to 10 years, our region has reorganised from a local system to a regional system and mixtures of sort of in between. I'm suggesting to you that we must, in this region, have both a local and a regional system. Our investment and our capability to date is either or. So my next message is investment will be required. Now, that's not necessarily capital investment. It would be time and energy of our awesome staff, our volunteers, but investment must be required. Now, if you agree with me, then the transformation strategy will enable you to deliver that. I think we have time to do this, but I can't predict when the next event will be. The transformation strategy provides 4 page number, sorry, it is. Mike Bush did a lot of work for us. Those findings have been incorporated. Our vision has been changed, and we've got 4 transformation themes in there. Our community is at the heart. Community, local. It will roll out through Marae and community hubs, through community groups and volunteers. And so as we look at our system, we shouldn't really judge our system by how ready our ECC is or our EOC, but how ready our community hubs are, how ready our community is. Prepared and ready, those are our plans, and at the moment they're out of date. Our system is effective, capable and assured. Around the effective part, having worked in council, we do tend to measure ourselves around value for money and cost of living and rates and things like that. That's an efficiency discussion. Emergency management operates in the 90 to 100% risk profile. That's an effectiveness discussion. So we need to measure our effectiveness, not how much money we spend, but how effective we are. That's a challenge and the dilemma that you face. I accept that. And our system is balanced and responsive to local needs. There are 7 lines of effort here. The Māori Partnership line of effort has just started and will, through time, let that evolve. And I think we should expect to see a version 2 of the strategy, and a version 3 of the strategy, and a version 4 of the strategy. So our discussions with mana whenua and iwi and Māori across the region evolve. And those insights get woven into the next preparation. Community connections I've spoken about. Infrastructure and assets. I can tell you that our EOCs and ECC isn't the standard that we could aspire to, but there's a range of things that are in that space. So there'll be discussions to be made there. Training and exercising, I think that's key. The heart of our system is our people. Performance and assurance, I've spoken about. Planning, those are the plans that we'll introduce this year in service level agreements. The last page provides you some goals for 2025, 2026, 2027. Those are the kind of outcomes that we should expect to see. But like any plan, there's 8 goals for 2025. If we get to 6 of them, we're doing well. 7 and 8, they might push into 2026. That's just how we evolve, and we'll provide the information to you via the government. That's the strategy. The report provides information on how we got there. Dashboard provides you a graphic and some additional information that's a little bit operational, just touch up the stance. So we're going to address this from here until my role finishes in June, from here to June, and then we'll take it on from questions.
Fantastic, thank you, Matt. And thank you for all the work that you've done to actually produce a dashboard to start with. Now, this is very clear for us to be able to monitor what is happening in our system. And I think this has been asked for quite a while, so thank you very much. Also, the transformation strategy, I think you've captured, I know across my council, and mayors can talk to your presentation to them and the feedback. I think at the heart of this is the community, and you've done that very well throughout the document. So what I'll do is open up to all our governance members. Please give your feedback, given this is version 1, but we do want a strategy to head out of this with, to start the work, to implement it, and also to communicate it out to our communities on what we're going to do in the future. So, governors. Kia ora,
Kia ora. Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your summary, and thank you, Matt. And our council in Hastings received the transformation strategy very well and was very pleased to be able to input. My question is just around what you've just talked about and your completion in June. And there's 8.5, which talks about the Joint Committee should note that as identified, there is a risk to local and regional emergency management and BAU. So handing it back to CDEM, this transformational strategy, and how we will manage that risk around BAU and the transformational changes that we need to make as a region.
From my perspective, the Regional Council is considering moving forward with recruitment of a group manager and quicker pace than the broader discussion around structure. I think that's a powerful activity that will ensure that we have time to embed the strategy. The group manager will put tweaks to it. I think we need to expect that whoever we employ in that role come in with their own effort and talent and push it a little way. Also, the plan to engage with the professional staff has been designed and will be consulted in due course. And there is discussion about how we could structure transformation to continue past my contracted role within the group. So we have considered mitigating that risk within the group past this point. So I think between the group manager and a structural solution, and then I think thirdly, I think I will present to you at the next joint committee meeting a discussion around governance where we might wish to consider a transformation governance group either as a subcommittee of the KEG or as a subcommittee of the joint committee or a mixture of both that manages on and operationalises on our behalf that so that you can get ahead and look at the long-term picture. So I think there's 3 things that we can address in that space.
And maybe just through you, Madam Chair, one of the probably previous lessons learned is we've almost managed transformation as a parallel activity to BAU. And certainly with the early recruitment of the GM back into the business that come June, we merged the 2 together into a single line of effort rather than one of the 2 parallel lines, which is, again, from some of the previous learnings where we've previously taken that distinct definition, we haven't seen the successful integration of that back into BAU. So that's another area of focus to make sure we can land.
So we'd be through you, Chair, we'd be comfortable that we have the capability and resource to be able to manage both the transformation strategy and the BAU.
Through you, Madam Chair, so there's some additional resource that is being brought in to support the transition, particularly in the training and development area, which Mr. Boggs mentioned earlier. But that would be part of the wider group changes that we need to make sure we have got the right capabilities in there ahead of June.
Shane?
Madam Chair, I think the other thing to point out, continuing on that point, is that actually the work program for the group office needs to reflect the transformation strategy. That should be what it's working on.
Yes.
And so it shouldn't be, as Doug has indicated, it's a separate activity area. That the outcomes from this should then define what the work program is for the group office and the priority.
So thank you. I just have one more question. Thank you, through Madam Chair. My question is around Minister Mitchell and the government inquiry and findings. Have we, and it's great that we've got our national body, but are we quite clear that the direction that we're taking in, have we had the input and association with what the implementation will be from the Crown, from the Minister, into our delivery to our transformational change?
Might start with Matt, and then if Dave, you have any Any more thoughts on that? Thank you, Matt.
Dave was my boss in a previous life, so I'm sure he'll count. The government inquiries have been woven into this. Are still quite high level. There are themes around assurance
Yes.
that we will find ourselves probably leading the country in if you agree to the structure that we design and then the actions post the structure. Discussions around training. We've engaged a training contractor to deliver us formal accredited training. So the key, and that was a key finding from the government findings, right? So one of the key findings around training is that each group is delivering training, but it's a slightly different standards. They're all in the same zone, and some are accredited and some aren't. Our key determinant around how we selected the training provider was their ability to provide accreditation. Now, that might evolve over time, but I think that's an important message that we send our community. The formal training of 240 staff this year, next year, and the following year, aside from the close to 500 to 700 people that are being trained by the group on an annual basis, that formal training turns our volunteer system into one that's professionalised. And I think that's the key message. You know, when you look at, there's a whole lot of stuff, a whole lot of tin, building this, doing that, comm systems. I think the professionalising of our workforce is the key that really comes through for us. That's my take on what the government says.
So,
Thank you.
Dave, did you want to add any more to that?
I think, Madam Chair, what I'd say is that there's nothing in the strategy or what Matt said that I have any allergic reaction to at all. And in fact, it's very aligned with the findings and the direction that central government's taking as well. And I applaud Hawke's Bay in terms of the lead that you are taking on this. It's great to see. Auckland went through a similar process last year.
Great.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Miss Sandra. Baden, kia ora.
Kia ora tātou. He mana, anyway, just in terms of the Māori Partnership section, the statement, it says 2025 will see mana whenua formally included in all levels of Hawke's Bay regional and local emergency management and governance. What does that mean? I mean, I like what I'm hearing, but what does it actually mean?
The PEG currently doesn't have mana whenua engagement, a mana whenua representation inside it. I would suggest we need a transformation subcommittee that will need to have a mana whenua engaged person or representation inside it, not just PEG and Joint Committee membership. At a local level, I'm not too sure, but I'm pretty sure. My gut tells me at a local level, if we meet as a mayor and a CE and a controller, which we should do on a quarterly basis, we should really be meeting as a mayor, a CE, a controller and mana whenua representation to talk about emergency management. So that's one of the plans that I need to submit between now and May. Is I know we have mana whenua inclusion in the Joint Committee, but for me it needs to go to the Joint Committee and then at the local level as well. And that's what I'll be proposing in the plan and engaging. So that's what I mean by that statement.
Yeah. Ka pai, well, I tautoko that. I mean, formally included, I think that's a couple of key words there. We are included in the Joint Committee, but we don't have voting rights. So, formally, we're still not fully included. That's what I'm trying to say. But I like where you're going with that kōrero. And, I definitely tautoko that. The other thing in that map at the beginning of the strategy shows, a few stats. There's 100 marae in Ngāti Kahungunu. Over half of those are in Hawke's Bay. Wairoa, 30-something, Napier, 10-odd, and Heretaunga, 20-something, and Tamatea, another 10. So, I think when we're thinking about this whole system, the Māori community and its contribution to civil defence, and normally that's as marae, but I think we can kind of whakamomona here tērā map. You know, we can bolster it with some of the stuff that our people bring to the table, because I honestly see Māori as a key partner in civil defence going forward. I like the kōrero that we will be formally included at all levels from 2025, but I think this plan can be strengthened by, even in the map, identifying, clusters of marae, talking about 100,000 Ngāti Kahungunu now, third largest iwi, te mea, because that brings kaha and mana to the plan and the strategy. But not only that, as we saw in Gabriel, it brings the mahi at the ground to the paharakeke.
Kia ora, Baden. Tautoko your kōrero there, and a key feature I think missing at the start of the strategy, as well as where we know our resilience hubs are, marae included.
Yeah.
So I think there's a key community marae piece that's missing at the front of the document. Kia ora.
Alex, thank you, Madam Chair. I liked that conversation, by the way, totally supportive of where that's going. My questions are, I think we're on the right track here. This is good. I'm thinking though, Matt, about what you said about we can't be local or regional. We have to be local and regional. And how is that reflected in that dashboard for managing the transformation? Because most of what is in there is about metrics of what group are doing. It doesn't have metrics or actions which are about the map that shows the stage of capability that at a local level we are across the region. Do you want to comment about how you think you're going to manage that?
I would imagine that when we consult on the structure and land on it, and let's just say that's 1 July, marries up with financial year, and that's the kind of time frame we might go through. On or about that date, you will see local emergency management teams matching with the local councils, taking a stronger control of their local system. And I would expect that they would then need to, with potentially more staff and a governance system at a local level, focus on where their capabilities are and aren't. We're sort of seeing that with the update on what actions have occurred post Cyclone Gabriel, with the next one of the agenda items. There's a lot of data there, but so what?
Yes.
The actual question. To give you some examples, one council, I saw one council state that it's trained some, a couple hundred staff. Well, they're probably pretty sweet when it comes to being able to staff an emergency management centre and deal with the first shift of emergency management. Another council stated they had 30 odd staff trained. Without even digging into at what level, that's barely enough to deal with one of them. And so we are going to go to what I would imagine are 6 dashboards. And I know this will be a pain in the ass, but I think we have to get used to it. A dashboard per council, a dashboard for the region, for the ECC, the regional council, and a dashboard that aggregates it up. And that way, when we turn up in Wairau or Central Hawke's Bay, we go, here's where we stand, our community, us, go, give me a hand there. Or we can celebrate what they've done. And in a region, we can also go, okay, well, because at local level, you're not going to be controlling the common operating picture, groupers. At a local level, you're not going to be controlling a lot of the central agency relationships. The group will do that because they're stretched and they don't match. And then at a regional level, we come up with an assessment at that point. So I would imagine for 1 July, you're going to look good and you're going to look bad in some areas. In some areas, you're going to look awesome and it's time for celebration. In other areas, you're going to go, wow. And that's going to be a local investment discussion, not a regional briefing. So I'm showing you the system dashboard. I think from 1 July, you should expect your emergency management controllers, they're ultimately on your behalf in charge of the system, to turn up and talk about the system at a local level.
Yeah. So can I just test your thinking and double check
Yeah.
a bit? So the governance assurance for the local system
Yep.
will sit here at this table? Or
Yep.
will I be standing up that governance assurance at a separate level at my council table at a local level? I just want to test your thinking on where that assurance check-in is going to come from.
I would expect that at a local level, you would make it a standing agenda item on a council committee.
Yeah.
Quarterly basis for your emergency management professional advisor, the senior one, and the controller to brief council on how locally you're performing. And they would be supported by the group professional assurance role.
Okay.
And the group's professional assurance role maintain consistency. Again, I see some councils have invested in common operating picture tools. Sadly, there's 3 of them, which means they're not common. So the assurance role would be to go, right, well, how do we manage this? And it's always compromising, but I get that. So the same thing will happen here. I think it'll be challenging because we'll be showing how we're rolling, how we're investing at a local level, and all the compromises you're having to make on every investment choice here with your colleagues. But I think this is the opportunity to make sure inequity doesn't get to creep in. I'm personally worried about how does Central Hawke's Bay and Wairua afford the system it needs? Because the rating base is so small, regionally, I think we need to consider that. And I think that's one of the topics, the major topic out of all of this, actually, this is a fixed discussion. The major transformation is going to happen in our system in 2027. There's going to be one around how we rate ourselves regionally so that Wairua has the system it needs, not the one that it can afford, but the one it needs. And I think that will be a really full regional discussion.
I like that, but I just wonder whether actually in the dashboard we need to use somewhere in that performance and assurance topic something that speaks to local and regional, just to make sure that we are, because we can start in the front end of the strategy, but if we're not measuring it.
I was intending to throw that to you later on, but it's a bit tough without it's sort of almost like a survey.
I say it for actually the reason why you've just said what you said about the ability for the smaller communities to resource what they need. Because the reality is that there will be times that my community has to stand up on their own, but actually the strength of the rest of the region and our neighbouring TAs and the regional council and where their stage of capability is at are actually really important for if we get in the proverbial and we can't cope on our own. And so the assurance, I can assure myself of what my council can do, no problem with that, but it's that understanding assurance of the rest of the capability that we actually have got each other's rear ends covered. And that's where, which is not because I don't want to tell your local council what to do, but if we can each be assured that actually we're all taking it seriously, we're all covering ourselves, that's going to help remove the parochialism and keep it strong and united. Okay, cool, thank you. And the second one was, I know we've got in here about reviewing the funding mechanism for 2027, but I felt like the language in the strategy that talks about group and talks about regional council is a bit confused, because group, in my view, is not regional council. Regional council is its own thing, and there's the odd time in the papers and the strategy where it gets a bit confused, and I just wanted to test that my thinking was the same as your thinking, Matt.
I'll have to get back to that one. I don't know the exact answer here. The alignment between EOCs and local council is, and their communities is one sort of strand that's key. The alignment between the regional council and the ECC is key, and then there's a regional view that overlays on top of that. I'll just need to check whether I've started to blend words there. I needed to make sure that the regional council understood its role to the ECC and the professional staff. Yeah. so that they didn't sort of end up with no one caring or everyone caring.
Agreed.
Yeah. So let me just, can I come back to you and check that one?
Okay,
Because I'm not,
thank you.
Examples of
Yeah.
them, just so he can clarify.
So I will use a specific example, and it comes down to the rating mechanism that we currently use.
Yeah.
Okay, and so this table, are accountable. We are the governors of this group and the staff that work for this group. They are administered by the regional council and they collect the rate on our behalf. But in my view, we are accountable for that budget, that rate, that operating. But we struggle to get financial reporting and influence and discussion about those financial things to happen at this table. And I think we need to unpack that a bit. So if we haven't thought about that at the beginning, your action around reviewing the rating and financing thing is going to be difficult.
look, I've experienced that struggle. And that's, we navigated it, but I can see your point. I think there is maybe we should view this as an challenge, because I do think in 2027 the right discussion to have will be to have a blended model where we regionally rate regional activities and we locally rate local activities. And so each council pays for its exercises and the training of its local staff, but we then, and each ratepayer in their local region does, and then each ratepayer in their regional rate fill pays an amount that pays for regional support and coordination. We have that blended model. But I know that this will be an engagement topic as part of the LTP, and there'll be a number of ways to cut that. I do think we need to have skin in the game, both locally and regionally.
But I do take me Alex's point that while we have the opportunity to have a dashboard, can we add a financial element to that? So
I can add it. Yeah, absolutely.
There's some oversight around, should be a standard budget.
Yeah, Madam Chair, some of the work we've also got to do at KEG this year as well as next. So in terms of the shift in governance, not just the joint committee, but we've also did the same thing for KEG, and then work out as we bring controllers back in as well, what's the right place for controllers as well. So when we talk about having assurance over the performance and the assurance of the functions that sit within each council, making sure we've got local controllers responsible for that as well. So there's a whole, in that kind of performance and assurance system, there's a whole kind of end-to-end process we've got to do, not just around capability, but funding as well. So so just probably opening that end-to-end process, we've got to get the systems and the structure as well. If we haven't, to be fair, I can add into in the previous.
Okay.
I can add the financial portion immediately to give you visibility about how we're funding this financial year and intending to fund next financial year.
Oh, fantastic. Shane?
Chair, I was just going to mention too that the dashboard, which you're seeing at the moment, which is predominantly around the transformation, where we talked about there will need to be that operational, and as we bring those things into a single line of effort, you will see a dashboard which will talk about, well, what is the minimum capability we've agreed to as a region for EOCs, for staffing, and where our council's at with that. And more so that we can understand is sort of Mayor Walker mentioned around what is our capability capacity? Where are the shortfalls and what do we do to prop that up? And so that you as a governors can have assurance of the system as a whole, whilst each member has its own statutory right to have assurance of its own membership, its own council. So you will see hopefully that blending where you'll have a single dashboard or series of dashboards that will talk about operational BAU stuff as well as the transformation stuff. It should all just be one.
Thank you for your questions, Alex. Mayor Kristen.
Thank you, through the chair. I guess just continuing on the same theme of conversation and around that performance and insurance and the dashboards, which will evolve into a blended one. I'm keen to understand, and I would expect that the service level agreements are actually a vital part of that, because that's what's going to clearly define local versus regional versus group and who is responsible for what and who. But yeah, just keen to hear some sort of further commentary around that.
I do want to support Shane's point. I think I will provide a transformation view. I've done it at a group level, right, for the transformation, and quite rightly, you've asked for a local view, and it's my intent to, for example, do an asset review with Shane and determine where I believe there's some gaps, and then the transformation dashboard will talk about where I believe investment is. I suspect in time, transformation will overlap on top of performance, and what you will see is that Napier has got green lights in these areas, and there's an amber there that means we need to discuss it, and there's a red there which means invest or fun stuff. I don't know where we stand on our ability to do that at the moment. I do think this whole assurance discussion is a little, I asked a really simple question. I thought it was really simple. Who is trained and what training do they need? 2 hours later, with whiteboard markers and looking like a spider's web, I'm not too sure I was any clearer. And I do think I've got enough nous in the space to know what's going on. So when we say assurance, this is a challenging activity. I know Nima has recruited an assurance individual. He's a really smart man, but I suspect he'll still spend a lot of time doing framework stuff and then get there. I think if you accept that you're going to get the dashboard and it's going to be a bit ropey at the start, and then each time we come to a governance meeting, you give us feedback on that's cool, but that sucks, then that's how we roll. I think the dashboard should drive our discussion. So right now at the dashboard, and this is a hard one at governance, and I have done a lot of portfolio management with other governance groups. They want to discuss everything, or you want to discuss the stuff that's interesting to you. The dashboard should drive your discussion. And I can tell you right now, the discussion around Māori partnership would be a major one that pops up. Community connections, that's going to evolve over time. I can't imagine that would ever red or amber. Asset review, based on the feedback that I've just received in my engagement today, there was some vast range of topics under that asset review discussion, from don't spend a cent now, in fact, find some savings, all the way through to spend and make me safe, and everything in between. So I reckon there's going to be some fascinating discussions in there. And unfortunately, whether we like it or not, under the training and exercising piece, we've got a lot of people trained in our system, basically. Which tells me a great story about volunteerism and a great story about how much care and araha is in our region, but it's not the standard that we need to be awesome in a terrible disaster. And so we need to be prepared for that kind of chat.
No. Okay. John.
Ma'am, I would commend you this strategy. I've taken my time to wade my way through it and reflect back on my experience in civil defence, in particular the Christchurch response. And the difference between Christchurch and Gabriel, post-Gabriel, was I think that the community in Hawke's Bay basically had lost trust in the way that civil defence and emergency management had conducted itself during the response. Now, that's an unfair to paint it like that, because there were elements where it worked really well, and there were elements where community felt they'd been abandoned. I think the thrust of Matt's work and the strategy is that it's an opportunity to use the strategy to re-establish the trust in the community in the civil defence. But the key part of that, and I'm pleased that it's right at the front, is it is about the community, and it starts at the bottom and works its way up to the regional level. Now, I think our reflection on Gabriel 2 years ago basically says that a lot of people in the Hawke's Bay community didn't understand their role in civil defence as opposed to the guys in the blue and yellow. So I think it's an absolute imperative to build on what we've done in the hubs to encourage, facilitate local level planning about communities' involvement in civil defence for their community, and the ability to move information further up the chain to TAs, EOC, and then on up to the ECC. The second one, obviously, it's a very live factor in Hawke's Bay, is mana whenua. I'll just give you one caution in this particular area. We must not make use of iwi facilities like Marae, but we must not unwittingly put people at greater risk by putting them in a position which in itself is at risk. There are too many stories in Gabrielle where Marae were flooded or had damage caused to them by the flood. So we don't want to replicate that in the next response. So that's part of the community plan. I know Matt has put in here the story about assets, but one of the critical parts of the reaction to the Gabrielle flooding was the so-called failure of the warning systems. They failed because they were overwhelmed, basically. But that says the community doesn't understand exactly what they are and how they work or who's responsible for them. All they know is the lights went out. All they know was I didn't get a warning on the cell phone. Well, that's sad, but it says to us that we've got to make sure that the systems that we're going to use are reliable and can be relied on. I think the fourth point I'd make is that while we're talking about training, we've got to also make sure that the structures we use in a TAZOC or the ECC is absolutely fit for purpose, because otherwise the training won't marry up with the structure. So I would advocate there having a working group established to investigate and develop a structural arrangement, even though my NEMA colleagues down here might disagree with the actual structure you imply, but you need to have a structure against which the training can be balanced. And some of the training aspects I think that we identified was the challenge of making decisions in times of uncertainty, the courage to make those tough decisions when you don't know everything, situational awareness and the value of common operating pictures, all those sort of things are right up there, but you need to have the structure first. So, Madam Chair, I would support the adoption of the transformation strategy. It's a big ask that we're putting on the region, but as I say, it's the only way to go in order to re-establish trust and to make sure that our communities in this region are as well prepared as they possibly can be.
Thank you, I see John. Update in your hand still up. Do you have anything to add, or was from the last comment?
Yeah. Yep. No, just yeah, when you start getting down into asset registers, et cetera, that's nice and easy for councils to compartmentalise, we got this, that, and that. When it comes to our Māori, that's why I talked about our marae. Those are Māori assets. But we have more than just our marae. We have our people, we have our hapu, and we have our organisations that have money and resources. So I think, all I'm saying is that when we start getting down into who's got what and who hasn't got what, I think we start missing a trick, I think. The strength of the Hawke's Bay transformation plan is the kotahitanga that's sitting at this table. I think that's where the strength of it is. And yep, we had a few marae topple over during Gabrielle, but for those 7 marae that toppled over, we got 93 that were standing straight. And so we those are there to help our taina when they're in trouble. I'm just saying don't miss the strength of this group, which is the kotahitanga and that collective strength. Because when you start digging down into what's that council got, well, then you start looking over the fence a little bit. And I think we should really be looking at how we go forward together.
Kia ora, Baden. Thank you. Leon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Overall, yes, good start to, I guess, building confidence back in civil defence. Yes, that's the start where we need to start, considering the events that have gone on with Gabriel and the likes of others. So, good start. good plan to outline where we should start in those key areas, the 7 key areas, focusing on that. So right there, I've just over some risks and observation of the risks. We've got some resourcing limitations, obviously, with this, so we can dream as we like. Gold plated, everything, have 300 odd controllers all over the place, but can we afford it? Can we have the funding to afford it? We may have 30 good controllers that could run the whole thing instead of having 200 relative controllers. So we just need to make sure we get that balance right and mix right. Uncertainty around what that next event looks like. We can plan for what we know, what we're not going to know. And then that's usually what takes us all by surprise. You see flooding as a major event when we had flooding. I'm worried about tsunamis. It's probably something we haven't been hit by this district. It's gone through earthquake, it's gone through flooding. And we need to make sure we're thinking outside that square. They have a system that can be adaptable to whatever that event looks like and not be too prescribed with assurance and governance about this, what this event looks like. That's how we need to plan it for. But what happens if there's an event that's outside that? How our controllers, how our people are going to be adapted to suited to fit what that event looks like. I guess there is the question of separation, HPRC, Hawke's Bay CDEM, and going through that discussion and giving clarity, I guess, for councils and I guess also for mana whenua and iwi groups as well to say, is that reason council running this? Is it CDEM? So just make sure we got that. I guess the last point I'd like to make is, just when we do a transformation strategy, it is making sure we have buy-in to make sure it then becomes BAU. We don't get that buy-in, particularly with our staff involved in this, and they're not going to enforce or incorporate that into their BAU activity. So how do we make sure we transfer transformation to ongoing good best practice?
Well, thank you, Leon. Okay, Mayor Crowe.
I took everyone. Yeah, very good.
Okay, team, if there are no further questions, we have recommendations here. Okay, and the recommendation is to receive in notes this in the dashboard and also approves the transformation strategy as proposed for implementation by the Hawke's Bay Civil Defence Emergency Management Group. Those are our recommendations. Would you like to move Mayor Sandra and second Mayor Alex? Would you like to speak?
I'd just like to thank you, Matt, and the team for this transformational strategy. I mean, this is what we've been working towards in various iterations. I think the big opportunity is that we work very closely with the change of government legislation and the change to the Act that we know is first quarter of this year, implementation next year. I think that is critical. We have our Māori partners with voting rights sitting at this table is absolutely critical, and the changes to how we're going to fund and how we're going to make sure we have all of our teams with the necessary training and the necessary funding, and both the local and the regional approach, us all taking responsibility. I think it's a fantastic strategy, and well done to everybody involved.
Thank you. And me, Alex?
Thank you. Look, very, very happy to support this strategy as well. And actually, I was so pleased, John, that you brought up about that word trust, because that was really what this was about for me as well. And everything in this has to be about us re-engaging with that trust within our councils and our system and our emergency services, and most importantly with our community. And actually, the logic of this transformation has already been led by our community. This table is already behind, basically, because our community have assumed that role very quickly and have been enabled by our local CDEM staff. And that, to think that we've got all of these community plans, resilience plans and hub conversations that are already up and running. So many of them that stood up during the cyclone and started that process with not knowing that they needed to. So our community have led this change already. It's now our job to follow up that leadership that they've shown to be at the front, with a system that coordinates and makes it as easy for them to look after themselves as they can. And we're there where there is the best. And so this is awesome, and the framework. My hope is that this framework allows us to continue to hold our system that is that backstop to account, to continue to move forward and be the best that it can be, not just for us here, but actually in the national system as well. Because as I said at the beginning of the strategy, we hold so many different risk factors here in this region that actually we can't just be any old bog standard emergency management system. We actually have to be really high performing. And so this is really important. So thanks for the work, and really pleased to be part of adopting this.
Thank you. Any other speakers? None. Just really thank you to you, Matt, for leading the charge on this, but also yourself, Doug, as our key leader. And this is a very important milestone in our post-cyclone recovery. So now we push on. Now we look forward to implementation, making sure this is fit. All those who agree say aye.
Aye.
Those against, carried. Thank you very much. Now I'm just going to check in with you, Dave. Do you have to shoot away because we can bring your item forward?
Can, Madam Chair, that'd be good.
Yes, okay, let's see if that's okay. We will move to item 7, which is the NEMA update. So we'll hand it over to yourself and Ian. So you decide who wants to go part A, part B.
Ian can follow with anything I don't cover off. Thank you, Madam Chair. And ladies and gentlemen, I'll keep it fairly brief. But I do want to applaud, first of all, the work that you've been doing, the Mahi, in terms of the transformation strategy that you've put in place. It's not the only place. In fact, there's a number of regions across New Zealand that are, but they all pretty well align with the direction that the government's taking as well. And perhaps if I start with that, actually, just before I do, I just want to say it's really important that regions are as self-reliant and down to local level as they can possibly be. But don't think you're alone. Because we have these other 15 regions that we can call on in terms of when you run out of controllers or recovery managers and so on, that provide depth. From a national perspective, that's that sort of strategies and system that we're looking for and how to actually uplift it, because it is not fit for purpose, and that has been shown not just from the NISWE events, but also actually all the way through to John's term, although he would argue that it was far better then than it is now. But the same issues come up each time, and the reality is that as a country we've under-resourced emergency management more generally, and the trajectory that the world is on means that these events are going to come more often and be more significant than they have in the past. So what I want to do is just go very quickly through some of the work that we're doing and give you a NEMA update. And I'll start with the MSIP program, and I know there's some notes in the thing. You may have read them, you may not have. But in short, that is a real key focus at the moment for NEMA, and it will provide to government. Actually, we're due to report back early April, but with a roadmap and a plan to uplift the emergency management and improve the system across the board. Some of the key findings that have come out of that are very similar to what you've had out of the same reviews that you've had here in Hawke's Bay. That's not surprising. There were actually 82 reviews that were done just on the North Island severe weather events. Our review of reviews looked at 28 of those, the ones that were public. But they've all come out with those same themes that you talk about in your transformation program. From a national perspective, one of the key elements is that the community is at the heart, and we've actually got to look at how we actually enable that from a national level through the regions, through the local government, but community at the heart. The COP, and Matt mentioned it, a few others have mentioned it. The reality is at the national level, we still don't have one. And we have right now a business case that is in development for a national COP that is looking at rolling that out to as low as the government can afford. And there are a number of options for that. But we also recognise the inequity of of some regions in terms of ratepayer base versus what it can afford. And they are often the ones that are often most at risk. There is also a new National Emergency Management Facility that is currently under construction as part of the new Beehive development or parliamentary buildings development. That's due to be finished in 2026, and the intent is to align the COP at the national level in particular along with that. We're also looking at a different alternative National Emergency Management Facility in Auckland, which will be better than the ad hoc sort of space that we've got at the moment in Ellerslie Racecourse. Along with that is a workforce of around about 600 that are required or will be required to actually manage the continuation of government in Auckland should we have something like Hikarangi or a major crustal fault in Wellington. You all are aware of, well, maybe I'm being a bit presumptuous, of the Emergency Management Assistance Team. We're looking at a way to bolster that, rebrand it in regional support teams, but they will provide a 24/7 immediate capability across the functional levels, but at a higher level in terms of more in the advanced specialist space that can support regions as and when they're required. The national assurance capability, Matt talked about that. We've just brought on Steph Mitchie. I think he starts next week. And he has already developed the framework when he previously had a period with us. And he will get a couple of staff to actually start working out how we're going to implement that from a national perspective. It's actually part of the Act. It's just never been enacted purely because there hasn't been the resources. Other than the earlier self-assessment space. But we want to do that more effectively. And again, in terms of not just providing support and assurance to government, but support and assurance to the regions more nationally. Professionalisation of the force, and it's really interesting listening to the discussion here in terms of workforce development. We're focusing initially on the national controller and controller space, and I think, Matt, you're actually in that space already. But the other one that we all often lose sight of is in the space of recovery. And the reality is, from day one, actually even before day one, if you get into pre-disaster recovery preparedness planning, that recovery theme runs all the way through. There are only two appointments that are actually legislated, that's controllers and recovery managers. And we tend to lose sight of that. And I guess if there was one thing that you might look at, Matt, is how you bring that recovery theme into the transformation strategy and bolster that, because that's really weak across the nation. And that, as I said, that plan and investment roadmap is due in Cabinet by early April. We're trying to align that, we will be aligning that with the Emergency Management Bill and the first Cabinet paper delivery back to them again in April, with the intent to deliver the bill by September so that it can be implemented or passed this term. We haven't been very successful in that in the past. There will be the opportunity for engagement, but it is targeted engagement, and I do stress that, and that's in terms of both the MSIP program and the bill. And I've got a conversation with the Minister tomorrow just to see how and what his appetite is to actually to engage with the mayors in particular, very much in the same way that Kitty Allen did with the first bill, with both the program but particularly the bill. So that's the MSIP program and the bill. Just in terms of other stuff that I guess doesn't keep me up at night, it gets me up in the morning. Science and research over the last 12 months has been really interesting. New science in terms of the Auckland volcanic field, which actually puts it at a higher likelihood of having an eruption than we will have for a crustal fault earthquakes in Wellington, in fact, twice as high. So we're working with Wellington in terms of how you actually manage an evacuation for something that you're unsure of. You may only have 3 days notice, but you don't know which of the 52 cones that it's actually going to come out of. And where do you put 800,000 people anyway? No, this is recorded, I won't say that comment. The other areas in terms of that research, space weather has consumed a bit of our planning time over the last 12 months. And again, space weather is something that we should all be aware of. It's not going to significantly affect directly Napier, but if we get a G5 plus event that hits New Zealand, then the second and third order effects are going to hit us, not just nationally, but actually globally. And that is something that we have been working internationally with in terms of collaboration. Just to put it in perspective, the United States see that as their biggest existential threat, full stop, and a 12% chance within this cycle of that occurring. So if you're not familiar with it and you want something to put you to bed at night, I can provide something like that. So we've actually developed and published the first space weather plan in November last year, and in December we did the first catastrophic planning guidance. This is for your Hikurangi or your Alpine fault or space weather for that matter, but it really does just provide high-level guidance to the controller, the directors, in terms of how to start managing some of the key elements, not all elements, but some of the key elements such as international support and so on for a significant event. On the other planning side of it, talked about Auckland. Milford Sound is a big event this year that we're looking to manage for an inland tsunami. People aren't actually aware of it, particularly nationally, but 85% of internationals actually visit Milford Sound, and you can have as many as 4,500 on any given day during the peak summer period. So that's a concern that we have, and we're working through that now with Southland and Milford Tourism in particular. CAPFAM version 2 should be out by the end of this year, and we're starting to get involved in some of the hazard-specific planning at the national level and what it means. And it's actually about second and third order effects and how the whole system and the country is reliant on each other. For example, the pharmaceuticals hub that you've got in Napier, when we had Cyclone Gabrielle, we had to fly aircraft, which is probably yours, John, I don't know, AME, into Napier to keep the rest of the hospital system going, and to understand what our interdependencies are nationally is something that we're working through. The big exercise this year in the first half anyway will be space weather, and that will be followed, I think, with the Hikurangi, but I'm not certain about that. But space weather in about March, April. On the training side of things, and again, this comes back to something that Matt was saying. The first thing we've identified is the fact we actually don't know what's going on, who's doing what to who, and how. So we're going to do a proper environmental scan and actually map what is currently in place at the moment. And this is part of the professionalisation of emergency management. And from our perspective, we think there's actually 4 levels. There's the introductory level, which is really just the SIMS, and that's just hey, this is emergency management. That has tended to be what has been emphasised at local level. That's not going to get you past go. And we need to look at what's basic, what's that middle level person that can come in afterwards and support the EOCs, and who are your deep subject matter experts, in other words, the advanced level, the Briggsies of the world and so on, and how do they get their qualification, their competency and their currency maintained at a level that allows for local level idiosyncrasies, but at a level that is actually recognised nationally. And how do we bring that together? And just to put it in perspective, at the moment, SIMS, everybody knows what SIMS are. There's actually 6 different courses of SIMS being run nationally. And that just doesn't make sense from an efficiency perspective, let alone from a coherency perspective where we can actually work and support each other. And one of the ones that I go to is the fact that we sent the controllers up from Christchurch up to help them in Auckland. They only had 7 days. That's all they thought they could manage. It took them 5 days to learn the system. That's not acceptable. We've got to sort of bring that into alignment so that we have that national system. And finally, we're doing quite a lot of, 2 more points. We're doing quite a lot of work in the logistics space, and that is about critical equipment supply. The Prime Minister in particular has an interest in what are our supplies at the national level, such as Bailey bridges, such as transformers, such as, don't actually have them, we don't have many Bailey bridges, or the pylons that some people forget to do the bolts up on. But key elements that we're trying to get, again, a handle on, to understand where our vulnerabilities are and what our supply chains are internationally, that are outside our, and I think we're quite good, outside our utilities and critical lifelines. But we don't know, for example, all we do know is how many, or that we don't have enough air assets to be able to provide supply to Wellington in the event of a Hikurangi type tsunami and earthquake. And finally, we actually do, and it's sort of below the radar, quite a lot of international stuff. The most recent one was to Vanuatu, but we've also recently put in 2 secondments, one into Tonga to help lift their capability and capacity, one into Samoa, and probably another 2 coming this year. And that international space is ongoing as part of the wider government program of international engagement with key partners such as South Korea, Singapore, and the normal ones of Australia, Canada, Britain, and the United States. So that's NEMA at the moment. Happy to take any questions. Happy to support you in any way that we can afford. But as we say, in the end, we go to war with the army we've got, not the army we want.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, appreciate the update and being with us today, Dave. And it sounds like actually we are on the same page on a lot of where
Absolutely.
is going. And I would like you to take a message back to Matt Mitchell to say, yes, we would like to be involved in where the bill's going, to have that conversation, which I know he'd love to hear from our perspective also. He's always been great at coming to us when we need him. So please do accept the invitation if that's what it is.
Thank you. We advise him where he should go.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's very keen to do that. How we actually manifest that is going to be a bit challenging, I think, just in terms of this really truncated space.
Yeah.
That we've got. If you work back from September, it actually doesn't give our very small team much time to get this sorted.
Well, we're available. Thank you.
Ka pai.
Any questions for Dave?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Dave. This is really fantastic for us to understand what's going on a national level. This is really, really important for us. The Minister talks about investment and greater funding for emergency management in New Zealand. There's 2 things for us. One is the people, the capability, and one is being able to have the resource and readiness and preparedness for events. Where do you see, and what is your advice to the Minister on how we should be, where we should be putting that investment? Because he talked about he's not rushing into this, but it's going to require more investment. We hear from our teams that we're struggling to attract people to emergency management. So how do you see us being able to manage this? We've just seen yesterday in Mangawhai in Northland, a tornado and a devastation in Northland. I mean, these events are so frequent for us now as a country, as a nation. We saw here a power outage because of a lightning strike at a power utility. You know, I mean, that's critical. That, you know, our country should be, you know, having to deal with that sort of stuff. And that's right here in our region, that we have utilities that can't cope with a lightning strike. So my question is, you know, we need people in this field and we need investment. The Minister is looking at that. How would you advise the Minister on where we should invest?
I think two two areas, because I've advised him a couple of times actually. He doesn't necessarily listen, but don't put that in the minutes. So. I don't mean that. But I think, you know, from when Gabrielle was going on, I was asked, how much do you need? And I said, uplift it by 60 million a year. That's at the national level only. And that would provide a COP. It would enable us to actually professionalise the workforce. A lot of people actually look at those two things. Do you want the COP or do you want the professional workforce? Professional workforce is no good unless you have a COP.
Yeah.
The COP is no good unless you have a professional workforce. You need both. And they're both expensive. They're both expensive. You need assurance over the top of that. But most of all, we need our communities to be engaged. To be engaged, they've got to be knowledgeable. They've got to understand their hazard and how to act, and understand that, you know, for these big events, they're going to be on their own for quite some period. And, you know, and I'm not sure how you're doing your emergency hubs. Is that what's his name's model? Yep. That's perfect, but it takes time and effort and capital in terms of even engaging at that level. So when you get into your training, and one of the concerns I have, or one of the concerns you will have, is, you know, a workforce of 700, that's great. You've got to maintain that all the way through. So you've got to have a training capability and facility all the way through. But that training facility that you should be developing is your train the trainer. And then your experts that go into the courses, just to make sure they're on the right track and everything else. That's the same sort of approach that we're looking at nationally. But as I say, this is a 10-year game, but we might only have 10 minutes. If we do feel it, we'll know. So it is really challenging, and that again is why one of the, I didn't even mention it, one of the key elements that we're looking at is how we actually increase our absolute meagre funds in terms of public education. It's $700,000 a year. That is minuscule in terms of all the hazards that we've got.
Yes.
If you look at the Resilience Fund, which was actually established before John was alive, you must have been primary school maybe, in 1964 was when it was first established at $1 million. It had a slightly different mandate and it included people, but $1 million. That's only 970 odd thousand now. What's that, 40, 50, 60 years later?
Wow.
So all of those are tied in, but there is a recognition right now because of this event, which I argue is more difficult, not in terms of the recovery, but more difficult than Christchurch, because you couldn't get a handle on it. It was fast, it was dynamic. You couldn't put your arms around it. Christchurch, you could. You could drive into Christchurch, 10 minutes later, or fly over it. You couldn't do any of that. And it's these weather events that are going to continue to occur and create problems for us. The big ones, they're going to happen. We're going to do the best we can. When I say the big ones, I mean the big ones.
Alex.
Actually, no, that's all right. We've covered a wide gambit.
Yeah. So if there are no more questions or comments, just thank you, and we welcome you back, Dave.
Hey, thank you. And again, I came because, one, because it was a committee, but two, because I was really interested in terms of where you're at with your transformation program, what the conversation was going to be. And as I say, I congratulate you on where you're at currently.
Thank
you. Thank you. I'm happy to know you're going to shoot away.
4 to 3. Time to go.
There you go. Thank you.
I better have a mover in a second to just see the report and update. Elder Kirsten and Craig. Those agreed, say aye. Aye. Those against, carried. Elder, thank you. We'll move back to agenda item 5, which is the Hawke's Bay CDEM Group Controller appointments. I'd like to lead out on this. Kia ora, Shane.
Right. So you may recall at the last committee meeting, the end of November, there's 2 things you asked for. One was to progress with urgency the controller appointments, which I'll talk about, maybe verbally updated part of this agenda item, but also a more robust process for the future. So this paper is specifically around that more robust process. As you'll see from the notes in there, I did reach out to other CDEM group offices around the country. There were not a lot of responses, and where I did get responses, there was no significantly more robust process already used. And I also did I have a conversation around what's happening in the maritime space around the regional onshore commander, and again, not significantly more robust than what we currently have. I was aware of the work that NEMA is doing, so alongside what Dave was talking about, the EM SIP program for capability development, I sit on that national steering committee. And I know in that space where there was a conversation around controllers and what's happening around the national controllers as well. So I reached out to NEMA to see what they were doing around their uplift of their appointments for national controllers. And so kind of looking across the sector, what's currently available and previous experiences, I kind of bring together now a suggestion ready for you to endorse as an option and see if you're comfortable. Noting that we'll need to formalise this into a policy and apply it for future controller appointments. The key thing here with this process is that it will take longer to take people through that controller appointment than it has in the past. There is an additional cost which will just cover our operational budgets. We do need to have at least 3 kind of alternate group controllers, noting that in legislation that doesn't distinguish between a group controller and an alternate. It just means the person who would act in my absence or when I was unavailable. We really aim to have a total of 4 group controllers. And just also noting that whilst this will take a slower process to put people through, it's significantly more robust than exists currently. You as a committee, of course, are the people who make the appointment, so at any time you can deviate from my suggested process. But this will give us probably what may actually be considered a leading in the sector. And in fact, NEMA's approach to this will be that they're interested to see how well this process will work in this region with the intention of perhaps using it as a national standard moving forwards. So a chance here again for Hawke's Bay to lead the way in another area. And updating around current kind of selection process or appointments or candidates, taken the names. Mayor Walker, you gave me one. I got one from Matt. I've got something from Nick, and also some from Emergency Services. I've contacted them all, and they've all expressed an interest to continue a conversation around being group controllers. We've also just recently gone out for public expressions of interest, and there'll be some coming in from that avenue. And we're also continuing to progress what might be available through the regional public sector as well. By the time we get to our traditional March update, I'm hoping to further along with those for you. But I'm also hoping that if we endorse this current suggested approach, they'll actually apply that to those people as well, so that when we come to you, we will come to you with a more robust process rather than I have met with them and I think they're good people.
Yeah.
And they've been signed off by their council. So I'm happy to go through any of the detail if you want to, but it's all there in writing. Otherwise, I'm happy to take any questions that you have.
I really appreciate you bringing this approach, more robust approach to selection of controllers. So thank you very much. Any questions? Thank you, Craig.
So how long is it going to take now?
Well, I don't have an actual time for you, sorry. But I would say that the longest part of it would be the getting onto the RANS program where they actually do the training, at least the face-to-face training, because those only happen at a certain time. And the reason why I think that's a really important step is that once you appoint a controller and you delegate the powers, they have the powers whether they're trained or not and can put them into effect. And so that's always been a concern for me in the sector over the years, is that we appoint people and then say, now go do training. So the recommendation in here is that you will endorse them to be controllers. So basically we're backing them. But then also it costs us about $10,000 to put someone through that training program. That's roughly the cost, which can't be fun too. So then you'll endorse it. We're not providing that training until such time as you've endorsed it. But they can still be involved and they can still support and they can still work under delegation of another controller. They just won't be signed off and been able to lead and have all the powers. Other than that, the rest of the time is actually pretty quick. The rest of it's just as fast as they do selection process and interviews. So that could happen within weeks in theory.
So obviously, do we need to be more robust and complicated? And that's my question. And, we're trying to make things easier with them, so that people understand what the hell's going on. And it seems to be quite complicating it here. And we surely must have a lot of confidence in when we come through the process from each council, from the CE's endorsement, it seems to be we're doubling up on that a little bit. I just think it's probably going to take too long. It should be a fast track system in place. I don't know. That's fine.
So I'm open to any suggestions on process, and the committee has, can do a fast track if they want. I guess this paper was in response to the last committee meeting where it was requested to make it a more robust process. If the committee finds this is too robust, I'm happy to work through some areas where we could maybe remove some steps. But to be fair, I would say that given the nature of the role and the significant powers and responsibilities someone has, then a more thorough process to ensure you have the right person is probably the right approach to take. Recommendation.
Who pays?
Whoa, three.
Yeah.
3 questions. That's the most. Two. Okay, no, go.
Who pays for the process? Whether it's the local controller?
At the moment, we fund 2 local controllers a year, as well through the group office budget. And as far as doing the additional personality testing, which is similar to what is done on some other areas within controller selections in the country, or certainly within NEMA space, we would look to pick up that at operational budget as well. It would just depend on the quantum. If there's too many, that would obviously.
Just a summary.
Wow, yes.
So I think we just need to have more trust in our CEs and our people who have these people to appoint. And we probably need to, I believe like the controller would probably got a mind has done it. He's probably very experienced at it. So surely doesn't have to go through a system that, that's all I'm worried about. I just think we need to make it fit for purpose and make it agile that we can get people through.
If I may respond to that one, and Chair, the one, without going into the detail, it's not publicly excluded, the one that you have in mind that has been raised with me has already done the range course, so that will be a much faster process. That's obviously for that individual, obviously not for other individuals.
Aside from process through you, Chair, the underlying concern was at the moment there's you and there's, Craig Cameron who's stuck his hand up to relate usage not 24/7. And until we get more group controllers and we run an expressions of interest, one of the things we need to be honest about, there isn't a whole lot of people that are seeing this as a fantastic job to sign themselves up for, and all the responsibilities and liabilities that go with this. So until we can run a fast process that flushes out some people that are willing to do this job to be trained, I think one of the concerns aside from the process is just feeling a little bit vulnerable at the moment.
Yes.
And to be fair to you, Shane, you can't be on 24/7 as the group controller, and it feels like we need to flush out. But Craig's been playing a role in terms of being providing covered in the last report. That Shane has got a backup in terms of the related.
So just to clarify, this includes local controllers.
That would be my recommendations because they actually hold the same powers. Predominantly, there are some that you have delegated to group controller separately, but all the emergency powers from 85, I think, onwards, are actually all 86 basically onwards are the same.
Alex?
Sorry, just to clarify, this paper is about a process to appoint local controllers for group. This is not for the group controllers.
It would be the same process for it, because in actual fact, you wouldn't want to have a separate process for each of them. So it is a controller selection process, whether they are group or local controller. But I'm happy.
Can I add to that, Madam Chair? The process also is to give you, the group, the governing body, confidence in the people that are being appointed and reduce your risk and liability. You've got to be comfortable in the risk and liability you wish to carry in the people that you appoint. As Nigel's already raised, they do carry a lot of liability and a lot of risk sometimes.
And back to your comment, Shane, around it used to be this process, which was a couple of people having a look at something.
Yeah.
Versus how the selection process should be through other CDEM joint committees. This is what is expected in terms of a process.
Now, currently, for what I can't talk for all of the joint committees, but the ones I did get a response from, it is very similar to our current way, which is the CE recommends someone, the group controller meets with them, they bring a paper and go, I've met with them, I think they're fantastic at the job, and you go, cool, done.
Mm.
But what I was saying is that NEMA, and when I'm looking at some of that work, is because they've experienced the similar risks with national controllers, and I can't obviously provide all their papers because it's still going through there in draft and can't share it publicly. But this approach would lift the performance and the assurance to you that you are selecting the right people, they have the right capabilities, because it's also about doing that personality assessment, not just I get a CV, but actually there's an independent assessment that says actually where are those gaps, where do they need to do development?
Yeah.
So you know you've got the right person with the right temperament to lead these, as we said, more frequent and more complex emergencies.
Kia ora, TC, you'd like to add in, please come up the front.
Kia ora koutou. I'd just like to total for Shane's report. As you all know, I was Group Controller for West Coast Civil Defence down there and held that position even though I've been in Wairoa since June up until December last year. We put a similar but not quite as robust process in place for the West Coast because, and particularly West Coast being like the East Coast, but more in terms of Wairoa and Central Hawke's Bay is how you can get isolated. And we got to the point where, as has been proposed, we advertised for expressions of interest. We went out to other agency emergency service groups, and it was about finding those that were experienced to a degree because of previous backgrounds I've had. So John over here is an excellent one. If he wasn't getting pulled into everything else, it'd be identifying the likes of John Hamilton or others that have either had extensive experience in roles by design of Mother Nature or whoever else rather than want, or also people that had been in the industry before. What we identified were 4 people, none of whom worked for council, but all 4 of them in the last 12, 18 months have completed the RANS course. You have got one of those people also in addition to somewhere else in the district as well. So you've got at least 2 sitting in the Wairoa district that have done the RANS course and done them recently. And it was done for love of the community, not for pūtea as well. So where they came from another organisation, so if someone from one of our emergency service core groups expressed an interest, and it was to ensure that those organisations actually paid for their time, just as we do with council staff and pay for time, as against people seeing it as an opportunity to cut the ticket and charge a horrendous fee. Because civil defence, as you have been talking around this tepu in terms of the kaupapa, everything has come back to that volunteerism. Well, volunteerism isn't just our community, it's people that have the skill sets and how we recognise that they actually give back and how do other organisations give back as well. Yes, it can become complex, but as you know, I was here for the first 2 weeks of Gabriel. Originally, when I was appointed to do the response, it was to come in terms of lead as planning manager, and then the day before was TC, we want you there as group controller. And then it was supposed to only be 7 days, and it was extended in terms of doing a 14-day rotation. And we got to see exactly, particularly for Don and I, that lack of a COP became frustrating. A lot of time and energy had to go in terms of setting that up. The inability to communicate, which John has touched on and say, Dave, the difference between the Christchurch and Slakeland Gabriel, it was fast, it was speedy. And then the impacts that resulted from that in terms of the fallout, whether it be burnout from key personnel and staff, or just in terms of the way that they have been viewed by others that don't understand what process was. One thing I will say is there's benefit in people doing the RANS course, but it doesn't give you all the tools that you need to be a controller, which is why in terms of looking at the psychological capability and those sort of things, you identify that people can work well under pressure, that they can make those ultimate decisions that may be life-saving or life-threatening decisions. So it's putting all those complexities together into one model and then say what, as has been alluded to, what gives you the level of comfort that you've got people that are right fit, as against it's a title that sits under their name, because they also then have to have confidence in the group manager and the team to be able to support them, which you've also touched on today in terms of training moving forward as well. So it's looking at the big global picture, but should it become the thing that stops you from pushing play and identifying key people now that we can see them develop? No, because RANS only runs 2 courses a year, one in Christchurch, one in Auckland, and the cost is quite expensive for it. So you also want to be robust at those that you're trying to either develop from your local controller pool or external are going to be committed to Hawke's Bay. So I remember sitting around this table 12 old years ago when it first started, in the sense that we run the risk of this program, we train people, and then they'll leave. And everyone had been trained in the 2-year period, whether Wairoa, Central Hawke's Bay or Napier, had all gone in the same year that I left and went down to Hokitika and those sort of things. So that's the risk. So what is the commitment when you've got those skill sets in place that you actually pull those people back, because as Hawke's Bay you have invested. That's the importance with the change that we're looking at in terms of stepping up the EMAT team, the emergency management assistance teams that come in. They're right, when they come in, it's at a slightly lower level to assist. We know that NEMA are taking the lead to bring them up, so you're actually bringing in trained and experienced logistics planning and welfare managers. That takes the pressure off, so that whether it's Wairoa or Central Hawke's Bay, you know that you've got your trained staff that are supported by a competent leader. So that's the intent for the robustness of the process. It is to give you that confidence. It's just at what pace you feel is realistic for that to move to, because you only have a budget to be able to get to on RAN's course at any time. But what does it look like going forward, so that if you tie that into your transformation project as well, how have you built for resilience?
Thank you, TC.
I just want to ask I just want to make sure we get the group controller appointment, but at the right level. And I just want to ask Doug whether he should have a part in the process when it comes to appointment of a group controller. At the moment, this is all through the primary group controller, an emergency services rep, and a senior leader or controller from a TA. It doesn't have a process for KEG. And I'm just wondering whether there should be a clause in here that says, for the appointment of a group controller, there must be approval go through KEG before it comes to here, and that would allow us to make this a controller's policy. But there is a section that says if you're going to appoint a group controller, it's got to be approved by KEG before it comes here.
Yeah.
And then I think we've got a basis covered.
Yeah, it's another level of assurance.
Yes.
Through you, Madam Chair, Shane and I discussed that as part of the full policy.
Good.
And presentation, so yes.
Okay, cool. So I was on that going to suggest that actually when we endorse creating a policy, that it should be the Hawke's Bay Civil Defence Emergency Management controller appointments process, not group controller, because that's a bit confusing.
Yeah.
Make it a controller appointment policy, and then have a section that says group controller, because I think we've spent half an hour talking at odds with each other, unfortunately, on that. Going to fix it.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to endorse the process too, by the way.
Thank you.
I'd like a bit more of a indication of how long that process is. 6 weeks or.
Have any idea?
Yeah,
Jane, on how?
I guess it comes back to the only way you can speed it up, this process, is to drop out them having to be trained first. That's where the delay is, right? So the delay as far as doing the actual selection, interviews, personality assessments and all that can happen as fast as availability of staff and that candidate. That could happen in weeks. And you can also meet outside of, and I'd have to check governance, because it's a publicly excluded meeting and you can do it virtually. That meeting could probably happen outside of the regular schedule if you had to do it quickly. But the question is, if you wanted to wait until they're actually trained before you actually delegated the authority and powers, then that's the limitation.
That would be a point subject to committee.
Yeah, yes, but I was going to wonder. I was going to ask that too. We have conditional appointments.
Well, I think that's the thing I would go with. You endorse. You can't appoint them, because as you appoint them, they legally automatically inherit
the powers.
For a group controller, they can. For a local controller, you can restrict them to no powers. A group controller, the act automatically gives them the powers. So that's my suggestion, is why you would endorse. So you're supporting and effectively, or but formally appointing them, saying, yes, we back you, we support you, you're the right person. But until you've got the training, we're comfortable that you actually know how to use those powers. Then actually,
through you, Madam Chair, we can, when we did form policy, we can probably.
Yes, please. Can you build that in? Thank you. Are there any further questions? Yeah. Alex, you have to move, and Kristen second. All those who agree say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Those against, carried. Thank you. We move on now to item 6, the local controller removal. Shane.
it's a pretty much straightforward item, noting that 0.5 and obviously the previous conversation, This is about a removal of someone as a local controller who's based in Wairau because of changing roles, employment, and that Wairau District Council does have identified someone else who they will bring to the table at a future point.
Happy to second. Those who agree, say aye. Aye. Those against, agreed. Thank you. We move on to item 8, the collective achievements post Cyclone Gabrielle. So, Doug, should I get you to lead out on this, and each council is presenting their achievements?
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
It's probably a bit of combination.
Is this
Jane and I.
vacancy?
At least online.
Yeah, I mean, it's Leanne to share this.
Oh, well done. I mean,
We've got some of our recovery teams showing up. Kia ora. Welcome.
I think we've got some others that I think online as well, but not. You want us to kick off, Shane? I can, yeah.
Yeah, sure. So this was really about just bringing a conclusion, I guess, that's probably not the right word, but we're segueing now from the last 2 years and now into that transformation. So I thought it was a good chance and Doug's idea to reflect on what we've done over the last couple of years as a region. I'm also just real conscious of the time and the number of slides. So what I will say is you'll have an opportunity obviously to read back through the slides and ask further questions at a later point. I just ask those representing maybe to keep it pretty short. Don't know if the slides are coming up anytime soon. You have the slides in front of you though?
Could we have the slides, please?
Haven't been sent them.
Yeah.
No.
I think Kadia has just reached out to Leanne to share them.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I don't have the slides.
Yes, Leanne, just review.
What I can do is one slide. Everyone else have some? It's all that.
Yeah. Got myself, yeah.
So I can start with mine and then hopefully the rest will come online and then just crack. So I think at the very beginning, you should start one from the group office. The one thing I just wanted to point out really without going into great detail is across the top of that timeline is the significant milestones relating to Cyclone Gabrielle. One thing I would just point out too was that actually for your reference, the last known invoice for the response cost of Cyclone Gabrielle was paid in November. That's how long that tail is, all of the expenses and paying out entities that have been impacted in businesses, etc. So, whilst the event might have ended or transitioned into recovery in April, there's still been ongoing activities. But I thought what might be interesting to yourselves is the number of other events, and these events are related to the group office around our duty officer where they've done engagements rather than just passively monitoring. And then you'll see by the colour of icons, there's a couple there with the ECC actually activated. So there's been a ton of other operational or response related stuff throughout that period. Keeping it just kind of brief, I thought I'd just move on to the next slides. So whoever's driving the slides, we're now on the readiness slides, bunch of icons on the screen. We've already talked about hubs, so each of the councils, I'm sure, will talk about the hubs. I just wanted to give you a total summary of where we are now based on the council's work and the work of the group office, originally rolling out the framework, the training and supporting the councils. As at 2 years ago, before Cyclone Gabrielle, we had 0 hubs in our community. We now have 27 hubs and 65 more that are in progress, which is a significant effort. And when I can compare to other regions who have rolled out hubs, I can assure you it was not at that pace. They've taken a lot longer to get to less. So I guess that's a real highlight for what this region has achieved. You can read most on the screen yourself. The last one I just mentioned on this slide, though, was the tsunami evacuation zones. You would be aware that the modelling came out for a number of areas. The single blue zone, what you'll now see us this financial year is updating some of the signage. So, and then there'll be a conversation about regionally consistent signage, blue zones and further work in that space. Lots been talked about training and those sort of 710 people. That's many of your council staff, volunteers and partner organisations. We continue that program, but what has been budgeted for this year or used out of the current underspend is approximately 200 people will be trained in coordination centres, so how a coordination centre works, and then moving into SIMS function specific and function management and leadership courses. So we will see by the end of this financial year not just 700 people at our foundation level, but 200 people across all of the council. So it's basically a shift per council that will be trained to a much higher standard. We've also now recently purchased a learning management system so we can do micro learning engagement, but also we can then start tracking completion and qualification so we can give you more assurance about the level of capability as well as capacity in this area. And the last thing on my slides I just wanted to point you to was the development of the welfare registration system, or called RANA. This is a piece of work we've been doing with Taranaki Civil Defence Group. It is a massive piece of work that actually a number of other regions are now looking. So yet again, another area where Hawke's Bay, alongside Taranaki, is leading the charge, where hopefully soon we'll have that rolled out as a very good system, which will allow us to not just register people assessing needs, but also to do referrals and case manage people who have needs during an emergency. That will be a regional wide platform. In the interest of keeping this high level, I shall pass it on to Doug.
You'll find.
Sorry, my apologies. That's right, I think from the top. So that will be to Wairau. Juanita, thank you.
Kia ora koutou. Thank you for the opportunity to review what's happened in Wairau since Gabrielle. If we go to the next slide, please. This slide's reduction. Just want to highlight the significant piece of work that we've got going with the flood mitigation scheme. Everyone's aware of the 70 million that's been ring-fenced for here, and the progress is moving towards, It's actually moving toward the goal of presenting a business case to central government, which is due to be delivered by the 31st of March. The other highlight here I want to recognise is the Wairau River Bar Operational Management Plan. So since the June floods, we were invited to the table of this operational management plan and the opportunity of the review of it. So I just want to recognise HBRC's efforts in that review, but also not only there, I want to recognise the efforts of their staff, their BAU staff. When it rains, the updates that are now coming through to the controller and also to the relevant areas within our council operations, keeping us up to date. Yeah, excellent. Next slide, please. A lot of work in the readiness space. These slides don't really cover all the effort and the mahi that has gone into that. What we did recognise from Gabrielle was that we had a lot of gaps. As I sit here today, I am pleased to say that some of those gaps are full. What it also recognised for us is that we are very limited on resource, not only on hard stuff, but also with people. And we haven't filled all those gaps, but I believe that with this transformation strategy review as well, we are moving in the direction to fill those gaps. Yeah, okay. Next slide, please. So with that readiness, there's been work in each of those areas there that are highlighted. I won't go through it all, but it's there for you to see what we've been doing in that space. Next slide, please. And again there too. So one of the great things I want to highlight here under the equipment and resilience heading, regional critical fuel plan. So we are identifying all of these areas. It was just one piece. There's so many other components that have been identified that we don't have a connection to. So I'm pleased that we are identifying these to prepare us for these regular events that we're having. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry, before I go to that next slide, just want to highlight too the partnerships and collaboration. That's been a real key piece for us. So since Gabrielle, there are gaps in there too. And so there is work in connecting with our key stakeholders and our partners as we progress through filling our gaps. Next slide, please. So our responses, we all know, they just keep coming. Unfortunately for Wairau, it just seems to happen all the time. And I'm tired of seeing the orange above us.
Yes. Oh, yes.
Hey, the gods didn't get the memo that we had supposed to have a happy holiday just now. Okay, next slide, please. The recovery piece. We are not recovered from Gabrielle. I don't actually know when we will be fully recovered from Gabrielle, but I feel it's going to be some time from today. And we are coming up to the 2-year anniversary of Gabrielle. But just want to acknowledge the efforts of the recovery that has happened up to today. And the last slide, please. Our why. This is why we do this. This is why we turn up. Sometimes a thankless job, but this is our tamariki. Our tamariki playing on their playground that was donated from Auckland. Our tamariki from Nuhaka School was sitting there, that playground there is at the chapel, so not even their normal school. So this is a really cool thing for us to see. This is why we do this. This is our Wairoa's future. Kia ora koutou.
Thank you, Amanda. Nice. Good, ahead of Diana Hastings.
Yeah, good afternoon. Yeah, I'm Regan. Mayor Sandra, do you want to say anything before I kick off here, or shall I go through and chime in on the way through?
No, you kick off, Regan.
Cool. All right, if we go to the next slide. So yeah, going by the 4 Rs, just kicking off with reduction to start with. The big campaign, obviously for Hastings, in conjunction with Napier City Council, was the buyout program. That was the big thing that reduced our community's exposure to hazards. Supporting that was a plan change to enable people to do subdivision. And the other key thing that's really been happening in earnest is the Havelock North Streams Management Program, which has been a good collaboration with Regional Council as well. Next slide. So in terms of readiness, the community side, as has already been talked about, there's been a lot of work in this space. In our area, we've got around 43 community hubs we're working with. That's been a total of nearly 50 meetings we've had in the last 12 months with community groups at various stages. That's resulted in a dashboard that we're using in GIS to track where all our hubs are and the status of them, whether they're trained or operating. And to support that, we've secured about $3.8 million of external funding, and that's gone into lots of different community assets, from rural hall upgrades to containers, radios, and all sorts of things. Next slide. In terms of the internal readiness of Hastings Council, we've made some really good progress on the people front. We're increasing the number of on-call rostered teams to 5. Total about 100 people have been through the essentials training with CDEM. We've implemented a system, online cloud-based system, to help manage responses within the incident team. That's helped us structure the response activities much better. And we've got about 1,000 sets of bedding for CDCs, 2 emergency trailers that have now got generators, and mobile Starlink that we're also putting into the EMO building as temporary accommodation. But that's probably our one key area of weakness, is a fit for purpose emergency operations centre. Yep, sorry, next slide. The other major part of recovery, well, the really key part of recovery for us, is the transport program. The slide there outlines the magnitude of the number of damaged assets and the work required to get them underway. And the key works list, as you can see, is pretty long and fairly substantial assets that need upgrading. One consequence of these upgrades, hopefully, is that the new construction standards will give us a slightly higher level of resilience, particularly for the bridges. And the building recovery continues in terms of addressing those structures that were affected by flooding. So we're down to 39 red placarded structures, and up to 450 that have gone from a placard into being white or usable again, but 132 demolished. And just to give a bit of a sense, if you go to the next slide, there's some pictures of the different key projects: the Kiruru Gorge, Crystal Twin Culvert, Puketapu Bridge, and Dartmoor. They're fairly big bits of work, and there's lots of them going on. So this is keeping our transport team very busy, and they're spending lots of money. Next slide. In terms of the social side, the impact has been quite dramatic, as been mentioned, but the Mayoral Relief Fund did quite a lot to provide support to individuals and to groups. We had the Civic Honours this end of last year that acknowledged quite a lot of that work that was done by community for community across various groups and individuals. And we've had quite a strong connection with our local mana whenua groups and marae, and that's been well received in terms of conversations both about resilience hubs, but also just better connection with our transport rebuild program and some innovative practices around engagement and contracting. Next slide. These, go to the next slide then quickly, just to give you an impression of the sorts of meetings we've had, community events that we've attended and provided support to. Yep, no, go ahead. Next slide. And the last one, the response side, we had one activation of our EOC for the rain event that affected Hamoana. That was actually a big step forward in terms of collaboration with police and FENS on the ground, and overall was quite well received by the community. But we also monitored 3 other events that obviously affected the region, which was the May adverse weather, June CrowdStrike, and the power outage in December. So it's been a busy year, and as mentioned previously, these slides give a taste of the really major things, but probably not an impression of the magnitude of work that's had to go in to deliver these outcomes. And that's the last slide. Thank you.
Elder, we have a Huriri Nature.
Dennis is online.
Who?
Yeah.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. Tēnā koutou katoa. Mayor and Mayor Wise, you happy for me just to continue?
Yeah, just fire ahead.
Good stuff. Just before I go ahead, just wanting to give you a little bit of a scene setting for Napier, because Napier is predominantly an urban area. And so that influenced our planning and our area of responsibility. We also have one marae in our city boundaries, and that is Muki Marae. We've got one staff dedicated FTE for emergency management, and we've got about a 0.75 from Hawke's Bay Regional Council. So if we can just go to the next slide. And I am trying to go through this at quite a speed, so please just bear with me. Update on our hazard research. The first one is flood modelling. NCC and released flood mapping in November 2024 for the expected extent of rainfall. We also are in we have a joint report with Hastings District Council and Hawke's Bay Regional Council, and this is for the coastal inundation. Our natural hazard chapter of district plan will be notified imminently, so we're waiting for that. And then Clifton to Tongoyo Coastal Hazard Management Strategy. We are part of a joint committee working with Hastings District Council and Hastings Hawke's Bay Regional Council. So next slide, please. Looking at readiness, we have at this stage, we've got 10 community emergency hubs. We are working towards 16 at the end of 2025. Community resilience plans, we've got 2. We're working towards 5 completed by the end of 2025. And then sector engagement, we've got our district, or we're working with our disability communities, and we've got significant engagement with our multicultural communities. Our older persons networks, we've had 3 events where we handed out 150 grab bags, and you'll see the picture on the right-hand side of some of the people of our older persons being part of this work, and then also with private sector stakeholders. Our public education campaigns, we were part of Shakeout 2024, where NCC supported the Mataruahau Hikoi, that also prompted individual preparedness, and we used our grab bags and went up the hill. Training exercises and workforce capability. We've trained 199 staff. That includes 4 controllers and their functional leads. So let's go to the next page. Plans and processes. We've done an independent review of Napier City Council's involvement with the cyclone Gabrielle, where we then developed an action plan for NCC emergency management. We also used Tracy Hatton for that, but also for our business continuity plans. That we had our first test of that in December of 2024. Our response plans are tabled with our controllers, and they will be finalized in the next few months. Our welfare plan has been reviewed and updated. We have partnerships and collaboration with Ukimuki Marae, Red Cross, St Andrews Fens Police, Napier Port and Napier Airport, as well as Pettigrew Green Arena. Equipment and resilience. We've purchased new digital radios and Starlink kits. And also we've got our generators ready to be deployed. And that was the lessons learned out of Cyclone Gabrielle. Fiber connection upgrades. This is a continuous process that our IT team is working with. And then satellite phones and radios are deployed to our duty controllers and duty executive leadership team on duty. So next slide. Our response. We deployed staff to the Wairoa flooding. So we had search staff employed or deployed. And you'll see the picture of them below. I just want to confirm or just make sure, just rectify that July should be June and not July. And then in July, we also had that crowd strike that I think we were all involved with. And then in December 2024, we responded to the power outage and heavy rain. And then next page. Under recovery, we also had the our wastewater treatment plant. It suffered extensive damage. And so our repair program was complex. So phase 1 and 2 was completed in 2023. And with that, phases 1 and 2, we recommissioned our MIDI screens and the biological trickling filters was replaced. Our Toto industrial area was severely damaged. We set up an MOU in October with our Toto Industrial Action Group. That included Napier City Council and Hawke's Bay Regional Council. The purpose of that was the flood resilience for our Toto industrial area. So we also in that area, we managed 110,000 cubic meters of silt. And category 3 voluntary buyouts. NCC had 14 category 3 properties with a dwelling. So we've dealt with all of that. So that's all been finished. So we had 13 completed and 1 with a kaupapa Māori pathway. Our removal of building placards, as you can see what we've issued there, but Napier City Council, our community connector, she's working with the building control team to help people get placards removed. So that's ongoing and ongoing community meetings. We continue to have meetings with our Toto, Brookfields, Miani communities, and these discussions and meetings are focused on building resilience, developing community hubs and community resilient plans. Couldn't have done that faster. So thank you.
Here we go, next one, Napier. Thank you. I don't want to diminish any further presentations, but we are running a bit late. But we will hear from Central Hawke's Bay Tamatea and Hawke's Bay Regional Council, and if RRA are happy to maybe present the next meeting, please, just to save on some time. Kapua? Awesome. Tamatea, Central Hawke's Bay.
Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Kia ora koutou, ko Denise Ellis toka ingoa. Me, Alex, do you want to lead in with anything or just let's go?
Please, you go for it.
Cool, thank you. Okay, look, just we'll give you a very high level presentation on what we've been doing, and like others have said, it is very high level and doesn't actually reflect the amount of work that's gone on behind the scenes, but you all know that. Doing a tag team with Debbie here today. She is our Community Connections Manager Recovery. So I'll just hand to Debbie to start with.
Kia ora koutou. So in the reduction space, both those climate change and tsunami modelling is very high level in terms of the regional actions and supporting what's happening in that climate change regional space. The tsunami modelling for Central Hawke's Bay hasn't directly impacted us with any change to our modelling. We fell outside of the scope of the project a couple of years ago. The impact for us is the move to the single blue line zones for tsunami, and that's going to be incorporated into our community resilience plans for all of our coastal communities. In terms of our risk reduction, Parongaho, very pleased to say in November, that was our last community to move to category 2C now that we have a viable flood mitigation option for that community. We still have a number of yellow placarded properties in Parongaho, including south of the river being the Kaumātua Flats and the Wharikai, and ongoing conversations there around what that potentially looks like with the flood scheme in place. The urban stormwater management for us was very much public perceptions on, I guess, how effective the stormwater system was being maintained and the potential impact on people's properties. What has been successful in that is the formation of community stormwater focus groups, and they continue to meet as part of our community engagement to help inform council on processes going forward. The Waipawa water treatment plant is a crucial piece of infrastructure for us. It's had 3 flooding events in the last 20 years. And plans underway with funding to relocate that onto higher ground. Thank you. The next slide. Building community resilience, that work program for us is just over $500,000 and fully funded via the New Zealand Disaster Fund, via New Zealand Red Cross and the New Zealand Lotteries Board. With our community resilience plans, we have 7 plans being drafted for our coastal communities, which are reflecting that tsunami modelling, and we have 12 plans for our inland communities drafted, about to go out for community consultation. We have 10 community hubs operational and another 7 to come online, which will be the coastal communities. Point there to celebrate for us has been the engagement through our network and networks with our disability sector, and we now have a dedicated community hub for people with disabilities to go to in times of emergency, and that's been led by our disability network. Like Hastings, we have procured 2 mobile welfare trailers, currently working through what community alternate communications looks like, which will be similar to the radios other councils are doing. Working with mana whenua, particularly for the 3 Marae and Tamatea who have received Ngāti Kahungunu containers, and understanding what other support that may look like in terms of resources that they require. Our sector engagement's been ongoing, particularly our community conversations continue as resilience plans are developed, but also through our network and networks, which is all of those agencies in Central Hawke's Bay that contribute to our welfare plan.
Cool, and I'll just talk on the operational readiness. So we have been doing quite a bit of work in this space, but I'll talk to our training exercise, Hokaha, and we were able to implement some of those learnings from our corrective actions work program that we have following the cyclone. And what we did include in that exercise was having mana whenua at the table with us, some really good learnings from having them at the table. Our emergency services partners were in the room as well for the exercise. And then we also implemented a new strategic comms position and a community Community Emergency Hub Coordinator as well. So some really good learnings from that training. Next slide, please. With regard to response, we have had a few watching briefs come through and a few small activations throughout 23-24, and we also sent staff to Whitehall to support them through that flood event in July. Next slide, please.
A big piece of our recovery plan outside of the infrastructure has been the social pro-actions around sustaining community wellbeing. Again, this work program has been fully externally funded via social sector grants. A number of things that you can see on the slides in terms of like our other neighbouring councils, you know, the community support we've been able to offer. We've been very deliberate in supporting our network and networks. Being a small community, a number of our agencies are a manager and an administrator, and that is their staffing capacity to stand up to support our welfare plans. So we've been looking after them through a series of workshops facilitated with Elizabeth McNaughton, with a view to really strengthen those relationships across those networks, because part of our corrective actions work program is to develop a local welfare committee, and these people from those organisations will be some of the key players in that network going forward. And leadership in housing, we have a Tematea Housing Task Force, and immediately post-cyclone that task force came together and developed a new Our Home strategy, which is 6PO across the housing continuum, and starting to see really positive actions in that group coming together for homes for our people in Tamatea. We still have 20 yellow sticker properties across the district that we're still actively working with. Thank you. Next slide. And just to close with the roading snapshot, again, some significant work being done in this space, and you'll see there initially, 72 roads closed with over 600 landslides. That initial response program was completed in June of last year, funded via NZTA. We now have 3 phases to the ongoing work program that you can see there, 4 key sites in phase 1, and then another 30 sites to come on board with NZTA funding after that.
Thank you. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Nico. Thanks, Tamatea. Kia ora, Nick.
Kia ora. I obviously missed the memo about getting someone else to do that presentation. So look, really briefly and conscious of time, first thing really wanted to say was a huge thank you to everybody who we've worked with around the region over the last 2 years, be that mana whenua, PSGEs, TAs, the group office and so on. It's just been a hell of a journey. We've had a whole lot of great engagements. We've had some robust conversations along the way, but they've all got us ahead. So just a few highlights. I guess if I look back over the last 2 years, there was immediate response. Some of the critical actions in there was rebuilding stock banks. So there's a few numbers in there for you. We inspected about 250 Ks of stock banks, rebuilt around 32 Ks. There were some immediate actions working with our colleagues in Hastings District Council and all the TAs around silt recovery and getting that task force up and running, which has moved nearly 3 million cubic tonnes of sediment off some of our most productive land, as also around houses, marae, and so on. Landcat, we moved through the land categorisation process by October of the year of the cyclone, and if you see places like Auckland now that are still struggling to get through their landcat processes, it means that the consequent flow on of that was that Hastings and Napier were then able to get on do the amazing work that they did around the buyout. So a really critical piece of work to get done. In terms of some of the resilience of networks, we had to restore 43 stations on our flood telemetry around the region that had got damaged. That's all in place, and we've then moved on to give that some extra resilience. So whether that's cameras here in Wairoa to look over the bar, whether it's more robust sites, we've also now got analog, digital and satellite communications across that network. So it's as resilient as we can make it. We then moved into the more medium-term resilience work, and that has looked at particularly flood mitigation for all those areas in Category 2, and you're all well aware of those programs. I'm not going to go into them now, Really big decision to come with Tato Tato to Wairoa WDC in the next few weeks for Wairoa, and that process is rolling out through 11 projects around the region. Some things which are probably slightly less below the radar for you in terms of that medium-term resilience are things that we're doing at a catchment scale. So just initiated a program called Land for Life, which is looking in time to put 300 extra farms through erosion control and investment into that hill country management in order that we try and stop some of that sediment in time landing up on the plains. I won't go through the recovery in detail. Many of you are aware of it, but this gives you a bit of a timeline. I guess the piece I might pick out of this that you'll be less familiar with, the whole lot of science that has gone on around the impacts of what happened, looking to track sediment that came out of the Mohaka, for example, all the way around to Tairāwhiti. And recently published has been a LiDAR capture of land across the region, and particularly along our coastal strip, which will help inform future decisions that we need to collectively make around coastal inundation, but also flooding along the coast. And the final one in that recovery piece I'll just mention really briefly has been our ongoing work with rural communities and understanding the impacts of the cyclone and mitigations there. Whizzing on to reduction, again, talk to a lot of this. Main focus at the moment is the Niwi work. That reduction piece, though, is evolving now as that work gets underway in terms of construction, to reimagining our relationship with rivers, not reimagining the rivers themselves, but thinking about how do we do flood mitigation in the future, particularly across the most populated parts of the region, starting off with Upper Tuki and the Heretaunga Plains. And some of that work is translating through to Wairoa, looking through to the Bar and Korpu Road. So there's a big conversation to come for us collectively over the next few years about flood management. In terms of readiness, some critical science that's needed to be done behind the scenes, working with NIWA. Working with NIWA on understanding flood frequencies, improving flood forecasting methods, working on river, lagoon and pump station monitoring, and done a lot of work here with Tato Tato and WDC on monitoring regimes for the bar here. We manage around 19 to 20 bars across the region. In the midst of reviewing flood trigger levels, what that means for civil defence, both locally and regionally. Soon to be launched an extreme weather hub on our website, which will be a one-stop shop for people who want to get information during a severe weather event on whether it's a drought or a flood. Heading into response, talked a whole lot about that. Just to say we've been real busy with Wairoa in particular, where it never stops raining since the event of the cyclone, but also down at Homewana and other areas. Really been keen to make sure we have got as close a working relationship with Met Service as we possibly can, and we've hosted their exec team and key forecasters a number of times. Like all of you, been putting our staff through enhanced training, so we've put around 130 people through either emergency management essentials or SIMS, and just working on a couple of people who might be able to become alternate controllers over the next wee while. That's a whistle stop chair. There's lots more in behind that, but just again to say a massive thank you to everybody around the region who we've worked with through that time, and recovery will go on. Got it.
Thank you. Oh, no, Mahi. Well, it was actually really uplifting. So
it was cool.
I just want to thank you all, and it's great to see our recovery teams. I know you front for us, Nick, today, but it's fantastic having all those other businesses come into our meeting. Yeah. So well done, everyone. Thank you. Can I have a mover and a seconder to receive those reports? Craig and Alex. All those who agree say aye. Aye. Those against, carried. We have to move into public excluded now just to approve the minutes from the last public excluded. So move to go into public excluded. Sandra, all those who agree say aye. Aye. Those against, carried. 5.